Gentlemen, before we commence this session today, a brief safety announcement during the event here at the Stein Auditorium. TERI is a health, safety and environment certified organization. In case of any untoward incident like fire, evacuation is required. You are required to exit from this auditorium through the fire exit gate nearest to you without any panic. There are 7 exit gates for this auditorium, 4 in the ground floor, right, left and 2 at the main entrances. There is 1 exit in the stage and 2 exits in the balcony, which are also the entrances for the balcony. In case of fire, fire marshals will take position in the aisle and the exit gates to help you to evacuate. Thank you all for joining us for the 23rd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating the discourse around sustainability and climate change. It's my privilege to host you all on behalf of WSDS and TERI family. My name is Mandavi Singh. I'm a research associate at TERI and will be emceeing today's session on shaping climate responsive futures. It is with great admiration that we welcome our distinguished line of speakers. I request the audience to please give them a round of applause as we welcome them on the dais. We have a ministerial address by Mukhtar Babayev, Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources and COP29 President, Designate Republic of Azerbaijan. We are also honored to have with us today Ms. Jennifer Morgan, State Secretary and Special Envoy for International Climate Action at Federal Foreign Office of Germany. She'll be joining us today virtually. And Professor Hosing Lee, former chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, for the leadership addresses. Please give them a round of applause. We are also pleased to welcome Ms. Dipali Khanna, Vice President Asia, the Rockefeller Foundation, Mr. Perumal Arumugam Pillai Kalyani, Manager Mitigation Division, UNFCCC, Mr. Joe Phelan, Executive Director, Asia Pacific World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Please give them a round of applause. Guiding the session as the moderator is our own Ms. Suruchi Bharwal, Senior Fellow and Director, TERI. It is truly an honor to have a distinguished line of speakers with us here today. To start with, we have a video message by Mr. Mukhtar Babayev, Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources and COP29 President Designate Republic of Azerbaijan for his ministerial address. I kindly request the AV console to please play the video message by Mr. Babayev. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and estimated delegates, first of all, I would like to reiterate my appreciation for the invitation to address the participants of the World Sustainable Development Summit hosted by the Energy and Resources Institute. I also would like to express my gratitude for the leadership of the meeting organizers, whose steady commitment has not only driven India's climate transition, but has also inspired nations around the globe, particularly those in the developing world, to consolidate collective effort to combat climate change. Our foremost commitment lies in advancing the global climate agenda. Building on the foundations laid at COP28, we aim to strengthen the collective efforts on implementation of the decisions. Our focus is on building a clear and actionable roadmap, outlining steps to triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency. I am dedicated to securing strong commitment from nations and stakeholders, translating ambitious targets into tangible realities. Another critical priority is to establish a practical roadmap for the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, recognizing the estimated needs of developing nations, which approach nearly $6 trillion until 2030. We aim to prioritize quantifiable targets and indicators, encouraging nations to make concrete commitments, especially towards doubling adaptation finance by 2025, is important to ensure accountability and real progress. Our focus extends to developing a comprehensive framework for the global goal on adaptation. incorporating measurable, time-bound targets for specific themes and sectors. 4. Acknowledge the widening adaptation finance gap and aim to foster discussions on significantly scaling up financial support, ensuring adaptability to evolving needs on the face of dynamic climate impacts. Crucially, we are committed to reinforcing climate finance, with a particular emphasis on supporting the developing countries. Our strategy involves promoting innovative financing mechanisms, including new private sector lead partnership. We seek increased private sector involvement through commitment to climate resilient investments and sustainable practices. Azerbaijan's decision to host COP29 arises from our strong belief in the power of international collaboration to address complex global issues. We recognize the interconnected nature of climate challenges and firmly believe that by fostering cooperation and dialogue on a global scale, we can collectively work out impactful solutions. Our unique geographical location, serving as a bridge between the East and West, position us as an ideal hub for negotiations. Hosting COP29 allows us to create a good environment for dialogue, leveraging our strategic location to ensure that the negotiations reflect the richness of global perspectives and contribute to more comprehensive and inclusive outcomes. In conclusion, let us board on this journey together, driven by the spirit of collaboration, innovation and shared responsibility. The challenges we face are huge, but so too is our collective resolve to build a sustainable and resilient future for generations to come. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Jennifer Morgan, State Secretary and Special Envoy for International Climate Action at the Federal Foreign Office of Germany. She is joining us virtually today. I kindly request Ms. Morgan to please deliver her leadership address. Ms. Morgan, you're inaudible.
Okay.
Yes. Over to you, Ms.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. I was just saying it's wonderful to be with all of you today, even virtually, and I appreciate my chance to do it this way because this forum has always been an incredibly important one, and the role of TERI in leading top-notch research and convening for years is really evident. So it's great to be with you to talk about shaping climate responsive futures, responsive to the impacts, but also I would say to the economic development and economic chances that exist. And we see, particularly, I would say, in the next 2 years, we know how important those are. It's a chance for every country to shape their future, recognizing the different starting points of our countries. First of all, by developing a whole of economy, sustainable growth and investment plans, the next round of nationally determined contributions. The EU released its first communication of our next nationally determined contribution yesterday with an aim of a 90% reduction by 2040, and then we'll look at what that means for 2030, of course. And we really recognize the costs of climate impacts on our people, on our infrastructure, and that in comparison to what India has been suffering, I mean, is quite a difference, but is compelling us to act. But also we just see that investing in a climate responsive future now, not in the next 5 to 10 years, which is where we're moving as Europe and the EU, and I think we can do more together, recognizing that the European Union, of course, can go faster and earlier, but realizing that really the real world experience of what the IPCC reports have been telling us, which is as we drive to 1.5 degree future and keeping that limit in sight, the multiple benefits that come from those choices that we make this the right way to go, make it economically feasible, make it much better development and economic pathway for all of us. So therefore, I think it's in all of our interests to do three things. The first is really to work and to shift away from a climate versus development dynamic or a climate versus economic dynamic. They are the same thing. And really instead to be seizing the opportunities for development and growth that climate and efficient and renewables-based energy systems bring in new industries, in new technologies, in new ways of living. The new industrial opportunities that we're seeing already, whether it be around renewable batteries or green hydrogen. We're seeing the opportunities even in green hydrogen, according to the IEA, that low carbon technologies could create a market worth of $80 billion in India by 2030. New jobs, we're certainly seeing that in Germany. And the International Renewable Energy Agency also finds that those jobs have almost doubled in the last 10 years. We're seeing that as a great opportunity and necessity for youth employment, greater energy security, reducing fossil fuel imports and being more independent from volatile fossil fuel markets, and certainly cleaner and healthier urban and industrial centers and driving down healthcare costs from air pollution and other health issues that come along with a warming climate. So that's first of all. I think second of all is really that we see that curbing climate impacts and building resilience and adaptive capacity, that is actually necessary to avoid the threats that can come from economic gains from the climate impacts themselves. And so we need to open up new pathways and greater safety for the poorest, for the most vulnerable, including things like early warning systems and climate adaptive agriculture. And India is certainly one of the countries that have already been heavily affected by the climate crisis, the heat waves that we've seen from afar, these almost 50-degree multiple days, but also the flooding. And so I think we need to be acting quickly to build that resilience, knowing that they hit the most vulnerable and the poorest the hardest, and also hinders further economic development, especially in rural areas. And that's why we need to do everything in our power to prepare our people and our communities for those impacts by building greater resilience, but at the same time we know reducing those emissions in an equitable way will avoid further impacts coming. And then number three really is around financing the transition, which is absolutely essential. So the smart allocation of international and domestic funds, but also critically getting really quite serious this year, and we heard the incoming COP president about the importance of finance, we couldn't agree more, about changing the international finance and development architecture itself so that decarbonization and resilience are the default. We know we have in the COP decisions around the sums, which are large, of the $2.4 trillion a year investment by and in developing countries, excluding China in that numbers by 2030 for energy transformation, resilience, and nature conservation. So concretely, we need to, number one, get strategic about using existing funds, what needs to get done using limited public finance, of course, recognizing the leadership role of industrialized countries. Germany takes our commitments very seriously on climate finance, but really, we need to look at all domestic sources in all countries, what needs to be mobilized more broadly. Number two, domestic resource mobilization, whether that be subsidy reduction, pricing. We auction permits in Europe, and then we're able to use the revenue from that auction for social transition funds, for infrastructure investments. Number three, development and investment plans with strong country ownership. Those are the NDCs we're all working with, and to reduce barriers for investment. For example, we're working on a green guarantee group to look at how we can be more effective systematically on having guarantees drive down the cost of capital so that investment can happen with the private sector. We need a 15-fold increase in private sector investment in developing countries. So looking at guarantees as one mechanism. I'm curious what the panel thinks about that. and of course donor financing. And the MDBs, the multilateral development banks, we really need stronger cooperation between these banks, the regional banks, the World Bank, in working as a system. Tackling debt, clearly for climate protection is key, as well as innovative new structural sources. Then just finally, I see my time is up, so I'll be quick on my final points. I think just to say a couple words about our bilateral collaboration, I think this can be key to shaping climate responsive futures. India has great potential to play a crucial role when it comes to keeping 1.5 in reach. Impressive renewable energy targets, of course, knowing that it's significantly cheaper than coal or gas. So we can work together to increase that diversification. We are looking to diversify our imports of renewable energy technologies. Certainly India has a role to play there. And we've learned a lot in our own transition. Germany is now at about 52% renewable energy in our grid. We're phasing out coal. And we know how important a just transition is, and so keen to continue our work together on finding those ways that are appropriate for each country on that just transition, and of course, building up resilience across the board. So thank you very much, and I look forward to listening in to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan, for your valuable insights. Now I'll request Professor Ho-Sing Lee, former chair, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to please deliver his leadership address.
Thank you, Suruchi, and Honorable Jennifer Morgan, and Minister Babayev, and fellow panelists, and the distinguished participants, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, congratulations on the 50th anniversary of TERI and on the outstanding contribution TERI made to advancing the science and policy of sustainable development. I want to mention particularly my predecessor as IPCC chair, Dr. Pachauri, was the head of this institute, and we worked very closely together for a number of years, and so TERI was very special to me. 50 years ago, when the TERI was born, it was the year when we had the first oil crisis, and the talk of the world then how to secure the next extra barrel supply of oil. Now the talk is how not to use oil, gas, and coal. The COP28 decision prompts us to transition away from fossil fuels, accelerating those action right now. This was in response to clearly a course for climate responsive futures. Of course, such a future requires more than just ending fossil fuel use in a just, orderly, and equitable way. We should cope with already damaging impacts of the current warming of 1.1 degrees increase relative to the pre-industrial, and we should also be prepared to cope with the more damaging impacts of an additional 0.4 degrees warming, even if we succeed in halting the warming of 1.5 degrees. The damage from climate change is unjust, as you know very well. The damage, especially in the vulnerable regions, suffer more than the perpetrators of climate change. So effective adaptation, in a way, is a measure to correct the climate injustice. The statistics show that the vulnerable regions that did not cause any climate change experienced a 15 times higher human mortality from the floods, droughts, and storms in the last 10 years. So climate action is an action, obviously, to accelerate decarbonization as early as possible and to deliver climate justice. The global stocktake carried out last year confirmed the lack of progress in our efforts to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This was not surprising at all because we heard so many times about a series of gaps, policy gaps, ambitions gaps, implementation gaps, finance gaps, technology gaps. It's really a proliferation of gaps. But what's surprising is that additional actions to close all these gaps would bring net economic benefit, something amount to 7% of world GDP in 2050, according to the latest study. There are many studies recently zeroing in on this aspect of climate action. And indeed, the IPCC assessment report last year clearly indicated that the limiting warming below 2 degrees would bring a net positive economic benefit. So we can say at least this. What we have right now is a misalignment between global aspiration for limiting warming and the individual choices we make every day. I believe that leaders are to fix this misalignment. Obviously, we need targets and milestones, but those targets and milestones need to be complemented by incentives, standards, regulations, and the public support of R&D. Now, these clearly are the tools we use to shape the future. The extent of misalignment can be seen in 2 scenarios the IPCC used for future socioeconomic parameters to assess future warming. The IPCC 1.5 degree pathway that you are very much familiar with is associated with a scenario group known as a sustainability. The jargon there is a SSP1 shared socioeconomic path. Really the summation of what the world would look like to pursue the goal of sustainability. That very briefly, it shows that the world moves to a much more sustainable path and respects perceived environmental boundaries, and educational and health investment abound. And then a growth shifts toward a broader emphasis on human well-being, inequality is reduced, and consumption is oriented toward low material growth and lower resource and energy intensity. So it is really this sustainable world envisaged where the SDG 2030 is achieved. Now, the resultant associated global warming assessed by IPCC would be, this is what 1.5 degrees Celsius warming by the end of this century. Now, in addition to that, let me share with you another scenario the IPCC used, known as a regional rivalry. The jargon is SSP3. Let me just briefly repeat what the parameters reflected in the scenario. The resurgence of nationalism, regional conflicts push countries to increasingly focus on domestic, or at most regional issues, toward national and regional security issues. Countries focus on achieving energy and food security goals within their own regions at the expense of broader-based development. Inequalities persist or worsen over time. A low international priority for addressing environmental concerns provides some degradations in certain regions. You may think that this scenario was written today. No. It was written 8 years ago, and it very much depicted more or less what's happening around the world today. Now, this socioeconomic scenario leads to a global warming of 4 degrees in the IPCC assessment. So obviously, we need to move from a world of this SSP3 to SSP1, the sustainable world. The climate intersects, if you look at all those goals of the SDGs, intersects with so many elements of the SDG. Someone counts that almost 80% of them. Now, this increasing adverse impacts we experienced for the last 2 decades, and obviously contributed to some backpedaling of some SDG goals, notably the increase in hunger, and poverty, increase in poverty, and also the increase in disparity of cross-country income disparity. So the official scoring of the progress of SDG said something like 30% of SDGs are in reverse gear right now. Climate solutions, many studies indicate that there's a zero to low emissions coupled with a high efficiency economy would create about 24 to 100 million new jobs by 2030. Statistics show that in these days, the number of unemployed is up something close to 200 million people. Now, this climate action creates, as you know very well, a lot of co-benefits, especially in the health and agriculture area. So, climate solutions are prerequisite to achieving sustainable development goals. Based upon my observation, and as well as based upon the number of literature, including also the IPCC latest reports, I may say that the policymakers know what to do to achieve limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But I humbly say that they are not sure how best to balance equitably various competing interests around net zero, the decarbonization path. The policy choice, policy making, to me, it's an art, and they need time to find solutions that can be acceptable to many constituents. Or there can be some kind of tipping point, social tipping points, embracing a full speed, a carbon-free economy. In that case, then would it be a leader's role to trigger that tipping point for a change? I believe such a tipping point may exist, and this will be a point where global aspirations are aligned with the local, decentralized, independent, individual decisions, producing themselves as self-sustaining emissions reductions. I'm sure that will be one of the marvelous solutions we wish to have, but we need to see. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for enriching the session with your perspective. Thank you. Now I request our moderator for the session, Ms. Suruchi Barwal, Senior Fellow and Director, to take forward the session's proceeding. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Let me welcome you all to this post-lunch session on climate responsive futures. We've had the opportunity to listen to a group of distinguished speakers before we basically initiate the panel discussion. We have with us on the dais 3 panelists who are joining us here today to share their views on the topic of the discussion that we have over here. But just before we start off with our panelists, I have some initial remarks to make with regards to the structure of the session and the focus, in the context of the topic that we have today for the discussion. And we've heard some of our previous speakers basically highlight that science has already dictated this is the decade for decision making. For the world to limit itself to a 1.5 degree or stay below a 2 degree Celsius benchmark. The next 5 to 6 years are pretty crucial for us as a world as a whole with regards to the decision making that we take and the kind of actions we take to be able to basically promote, to promote climate action, reduce the emissions on one hand and build resilience on the other. Given the decisions that we take, basically, we are going to basically determine how severe is climate change going to hit us. And that's what we heard Dr. Ho Sung Lee also talk about. The consequences are dependent on the actions we take today and tomorrow to be able to address this issue. irrespective of the fact we are locked into climate change in the next few decades, even if we go for mitigation actions, and that's my belief. I am a person who belongs to the adaptation community and have been serving the adaptation community for so many years. But today, adaptation and building risk resilience has become equally important as focusing on mitigation. And therefore, we have quite a number of issues at hand with regards to focusing on building the ambition for mitigation, investing in adaptation and risk resilience. I think the focus on loss and damage, and also residual impacts, because adaptation is not going to address all issues, right? So with that, I think I would like to open the discussion to my fellow panelists and basically request them to focus on sharing their views with regards to the kind of leadership that is needed to basically promote this climate ambition forward. Where is it that we are limiting? Where are the gaps you think that exist? Basis which we can basically make changes or change the world in a direction to the scales in terms of the kind of actions that are needed. So our first panelist is Ms. Dipali Khanna, and just introducing her. She is the Vice President Asia from the Rockefeller Foundation. She leads the foundation's initiatives in the region to build strategic collaborations to maximize impact and influence. As a part of the senior leadership team at the foundation, she's contributed to the foundation's efforts to make opportunity universal and sustainable for all. And I would like to request her to take the podium and share her views with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you for having me here. Every year when I come to the World Sustainable Development Summit, I'm extremely pleased that these discussions that we have here gradually but steadily lead to shift in how the world looks at some of the most pressing issues of our times. This year is even more special. As TERI celebrates 50 years of impact, we at the Rockefeller Foundation are grateful for our long-standing partnership and feel privileged to be part of the journey. Coming to the question, what is the type of leadership needed to shape climate-responsive futures? We are living through times that present us with unforeseeable challenges, but humongous opportunities as well. The climate crisis is threatening our planet, our livelihoods, and our well-being. But it also offers us a chance to transform our societies, our economies, and our values. To seize this opportunity at scale, leadership with a multifaceted approach is needed, involving a complex interplay of attributes and actions. Central to this is a big bets mindset, a belief that seeking to solve problems boldly rather than setting for incremental improvements or pilots that we're very familiar with, will attract partners with the capacity to achieve transformational change. Equally crucial is to bring together a diverse range of stakeholders, often from sectors that traditionally do not collaborate. This involves bridging gaps between government entities, private companies, nonprofits, and most importantly, the communities themselves who are impacted the most. In addition, we must ensure that voices traditionally marginalized in environmental discourse, particularly those of women, young people, and local communities, are not just heard, but are integral to decision-making processes. This approach acknowledges the disproportionate impact of climate change on marginalized groups and ensures that solutions are equitable and effective at the grassroots level. Transcending boundaries, both geographical and disciplinary, is also vital. Climate change and sustainable development are global issues that demand us to think and act beyond local or national interests. This requires a deep understanding of international dynamics and the ability to negotiate and collaborate across cultures and political divides. We do understand this is not easy, but this is really what is needed. A sense of urgency is another defining characteristic. The rapidly escalating nature of environmental crisis requires leaders who can act swiftly and decisively. However, this urgency must be balanced with thoughtfulness to avoid unintended consequences. And I want to underline the unintended consequences. We all have good ambitions and aspirations, but we really need to be thinking and posing around that. Translating words into action is where many leaders face challenges. Effective leadership means being able to convert ambition, plans, and policies into tangible, impactful actions, which is not easy. This involves not only strategic thinking, but also operational acumen and the ability to drive and manage change. Lastly, stronger accountability is fundamental. This involves establishing clear, measurable goals, transparently tracking progress, and being answerable to stakeholders, including the public. Accountability ensures that leadership is not just about setting agendas, but also about achieving real positive change in the world. Across its legacy of over 111 years, the Rockefeller Foundation has always committed itself to supporting such leaders and institutions who, through the innovative ideas, have brought about paradigm shift in the world. Be it supporting the setting up of WHO at a global level, or eminent institutions like ICMR and AIMS New Delhi at a national level. At the United Nations General Assembly last year, we announced that we will invest more than $1 billion over the next 5 years to advance a global climate transition and help ensure everybody can participate in it. Our new strategy has two central pillars. First, being about bringing the world together to address climate change in a more concerted manner. And second, to seize the climate transition's opportunities and benefits for the billions of people who have historically been denied them. In the face of climate change and other crises, distrust and cynicism are leading too many to aim too low. That is why the Rockefeller Foundation, we are optimistic that with a big bets mindset, we will be able to act boldly, find fresh, innovative solutions, recruit and retain unlikely partners, and fiercely measure results, learn and persist, and most importantly, hold ourselves accountable. If this is something that resonates with you all here, I invite you to join us in this journey, as we can't do it alone. Together, we can lead change that extends beyond our immediate horizon. I would like to close with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi that inspires me profoundly. In a gentle way, you can shake the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipali. To close on that optimistic note, and we move over to our next panelist, Mr. Perumal Argumpillai Kalyani. He's the manager of the mitigation division at the UNFCCC. I don't have his details, but I have known him for some time, actually. He's been core in leading the negotiations at the UNFCCC on Article 6, and of course has a lot to do with regards to contributions on carbon markets and its developments, and the discussions that we see at every COP on this particular topic. So over to you.
No, thank you. I have a mic. So yeah, thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for inviting UNFCCC to be here. Congratulations to TERI. And we also have a long-standing association with TERI. UNFCCC has a memorandum of understanding with TERI in terms of working together in bringing the voice of the Global South to the forefront. Coming from the organization, I think the first and foremost in terms of the leadership quality that I'm going to talk about is the international cooperation. Cooperation, like in terms of addressing things in a comprehensive and a synergetic manner that is interlinked with the three sister conventions, the climate change, biodiversity, and also the land. So we cannot no longer think climate change in silo. I think like if we have to collectively move forward in addressing the change that we are aspiring for, then we need to look these three conventions together. There are various efforts that is being put within the UN fraternity in terms of bringing these things together. So I think the first and foremost is the multilateralism and the international cooperation in terms of addressing these issues, both within the paradigm of climate change, biodiversity, and the land. The second aspect that I would like to emphasize is the Troika model. Like I would like to see from the leadership, I think the global leadership has delivered, We always, like, I think we heard from the foundation about the cynicism that lies around that. Always we say that we have not done enough, and I think we heard that in the morning panels as well. First, to recognize the efforts that we have put forward in terms of delivering, right? Like where we started 3 decades ago under this convention, and I think there was one of the colleagues from the panel raised a question of asking that how many of you think that we are in a better place than where we were before? And I think we have a professor next to us from the IPCC who have done the studies. If you have seen, we actually have bent the curve from where we would have been. Of course, we have to go much further in terms of reaching 1.5 degree in terms of bending the curve, but it's quite clear that we have moved from where we were, so from 5 degrees to 3 degrees to close to 2.5 in what countries have committed today as NDC in that. So we have to take that positive spirit on that. The third one, I think, is the cooperation of the leaders within like the G20 process. I think we heard from the upcoming COP president designate from Azerbaijan talking about tripling of renewable and doubling of energy efficiency. This hasn't come out of a roof into the process. It came as a leaders' declaration, as New Delhi leaders' declaration from here. We are seeing that Brazil has put together a new task force under the climate finance track to look at the global mobilization towards climate action, where to bring the different elements, and then we have the South Africa coming forward. So this is the basic countries looking at how the world has to shape. That's collective leadership coming from the major emerging economies, driving together would be moving towards the climate action. The fourth one, I would say, is in terms of, we heard also from other colleagues, is the lateral and the vertical integration of things. It's not just the top-down approach or from a global policy level. I think it has to be an action that's coming from all cut across. So I think I would say basically as a lateral and a vertical integration. And I would not end without saying my favorite one, which is having a fair price of carbon. I think in terms of more and more when we have an effective and a robust carbon pricing, I think this will change the needle in terms of action. And the leaders, like I think the success that we are seeing today, like I think I don't have any doubts on any of the leadership that is being right here. I think she made it very clear that in terms of people trying to balance between the development and climate change, that conversation itself has changed, right? Like people were averse to talk about climate change because they thought that's a threat to the development. But now I'm sure that since this has become a main discourse within the political conversations, people do see climate change as an opportunity for growth rather than being a hindrance for growth. I think that is changing. I think the global leadership is providing that. And then I don't want to contradict with what my colleague said earlier in terms of, I think we have to think globally, act locally, and deliver globally. So I would add the deliver globally because the standard thing was think globally and act locally. But I would say that we also, for this climate is one, and we need to deliver it globally. In terms of accountability, yes, India is again, like fortunately, the Asia-Pacific region is the one which will be taking stock of the climate progress. The Prime Minister of India has put forward his interest in hosting the COP in 2028 in India. Let's not forget that is the year the second global stocktake will be undertaken. And whatever parties have committed in Dubai last year, plus what they have put forward, we would be seeing the progress within the global stocktake process. And that's where the accountability comes in. And I think that we also heard as one of the points that we need to look in terms of the accountability. And also by 2028, we would have got at least 2 biennial transparency reports submitted by countries in terms of their tracking of progress towards their climate action. That might provide the confidence in terms of investments to go on. And I think we had like enough of a coma on finance, so I will not talk about finance and the necessity and the need of the finance, because 2024 COP is a finance COP, 2025 Brazil is a ratcheting COP of looking at what countries are going to do in terms of NDC. So this 3 years of all the outside process plus the UNFCCC multilateral process and this collective leadership, I'm sure that we will be having a sustainable future going forward. I'm much more optimistic. Thank you.
So thank you again for ending on the optimistic note on collective leadership that may push the agenda forward. And we move over to our next panelist, Mr. Joe Phelan, Executive Director, Asia Pacific with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. He's the global CEO. WBCSD is the global CEO-led community of the world's leading sustainable businesses, working together to realize a net zero, nature positive, more equitable future. We've been associated with the WBCSD for a long time on this platform, and we are eager to hear how the BCSD has moved forward on its agenda in getting the community together. Over to you, Mr. Joe.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. It's been a great day, and I've learned a lot, and it's great to see senior faculty like Dr. Ghosh, and I look forward to hearing Dr. Mathur speak, and a lot of friends and friendly faces, and congratulations to Dr. Vidya Bhavan for this. I'd also, everyone who queued for lunch, I'd like to honor you for sticking out the queue, and I hope that you got your lunch. So my name is Joe. I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We aspire to be a leadership group. Defining leadership changes over time, but currently today, actually, what leadership is for business on climate is actually very well defined. And I don't know how many of you here are from business. If you are, you probably know what you're accountable for and what leadership is. If not, these are the questions that you should be asking anyone you meet in business. Do you have a net zero target? Do you have science-informed interim targets for 2030? Net zero basically means getting down to only 10% or less of your emissions by 2050. Science-informed basically means halving your emissions by 2030. Really steep curves. Do these targets cover not only your own operations and your power, but what we call scope 3, your supply chain, all the material parts of your supply chain? These are other questions you can ask to determine if a business is leading. Are you communicating your progress against those targets, and are you on track? The answers to these questions will tell you if a company is leading or not. So that's what leadership is. But let me tell you a bit more about what's expected today. So the world really is turning to business for sustainability solutions, and all companies are expected to drive transformation into their value chains using science and data and collaboration to transform and decarbonize. And companies are expected to embrace accountability. We've heard about accountability, and really as business now, it's not about compliance or this term green hushing to go alongside greenwashing. It's about embracing accountability. And that's because accountability, only by being accountable can we build the trust needed to form the partnerships to create the change we need. But also in business, in academia, in government, we know that by being accountable is how we achieve results. So the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we're a community of leaders, fantastic leaders in companies who are committed to a common vision of by 2050, 9 billion people or more living well within the limits of the planet, and all working together to share knowledge and find solutions to achieve that mission. So, a very kind of inspirational, pragmatic, grounded but visionary group of practitioners and leaders from across companies, including a lot of businesses from India you would know, like Godrej Group and Aditya Birla Group and ITC and UPL and JSW Steel, for example, India Power. So, but 230 companies from around the world. And what they're doing and what leadership is to drive solutions through your value chains. First of all, that means investing in renewable energy and energy efficiency. It's come from the top. It means developing net zero products and services. In time, it will mean investing in technologies like hydrogen and CCS, but they're not ready yet. It means working with your supply chain to co-create low carbon solutions, and also with your material suppliers to create solutions. And it means at scale upskilling your workforce across functions, across departments to build their net zero capabilities. It means that not only your business, but also the communities that surround your business are able to withstand the physical consequences of climate change. We experience them here in India all the time. If your communities aren't able to withstand those physical changes, then you're not able to, because they won't allow you to continue to operate. They'll come and demand water from your reservoir, for example. But also that you and your communities are able to withstand the economic transformation that is underway and will accelerate as we move into a low carbon, ultimately net zero world. So businesses need to form multi-stakeholder partnerships with communities. They need to invest in and co-create public data sets on natural resources, on weather events, on the resilience of communities, on fire hazards, on water resources. And companies need to move from a compliance mindset to understand the corporate performance and accountability system for managing climate and nature and equity. And really that's about understanding your climate risks using TCFD. It's about setting science-based targets. It's about integrating your plan into corporate strategy and the incentives that you have. It's about putting in place proper controls and accounting rules that can get financial grade data of the performance of your transformation plan, so that you can explain to the markets, your customers, to regulators, what the actual performance of your operations are, to using ISSB and GRI and other standards like that. By driving that accountability, by managing performance, you'll drive transformation in your business and ultimately provide better information to the capital markets, which we hope will change the way that the incentive structure works, and the capital markets will reward more sustainable practice. Let me finish just by saying three things that we're going to be doing. So our members, along with the World Resources Institute and with scientists and a strong governance framework, will be upgrading the greenhouse gas protocol so that it's much more fit for purpose to drive performance today. We are creating a standard for product level carbon footprinting based on primary emissions data that can be exchanged across different systems. And that allows scale, and that allows the SMEs to be part of climate action. And through a product called the Climate Drive, we're enabling the upskilling of large numbers of people to be able to take forward a net zero agenda within companies all around the world. So I'll finish there. Thank you.
Coming across all the presentations that we've heard, I think we've heard some key words, and I'm just throwing those keywords up. It's partnerships, it's collective leadership, it's multilateral linkages, international cooperation, and of course, the optimism that we see, that we've heard each of our speakers talk about. I would just like to open the floor for one or two questions that we can take before we'll have to close this session. And I just want to see a raise of hands basis which we can move to the concerned person. So one question there. Yes? You can hand a mic over. It's here.
Hello. Yeah. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abhishek. As the topic for this current panel discussion was about shaping the future. Okay. So my question to the panel was regarding the digital carbon footprints and how can we reduce or manage our digital assets. Like example, after the majorly after the COVID wave, the major industries as well as even if we consider some schools as well as colleges are shifting to the digital media for there may be classes, tuitions, or even for a business meeting. So while managing those assets or while managing those data sets, we require a huge amount of servers, and we need a lot of electricity to just to maintain it. So my question to the team or to the panel was about that managing the digital footprint, because as we are progressing we will be using more of a digital media as well as online or digital kind of meetings to control or to just to manage the meetings which were used to happen earlier, at at the physical level. So my question was related to that.
Okay. So there'll always be one technology that replaces the other. I just want to check with my fellow panelists. Who would like to take this question?
Yeah, I think no, thanks for that question. I think in terms of that, and I think that's where I said about the international cooperation. One of the trends that we are looking at is in terms of having these data centers being placed as a conscious decision to place those in countries, or you have that of course the data center consumes a lot of power and a lot of energy. So people are looking at either putting these data centers where currently there are low emissions in terms of where this could be placed, or in places where that they could not geographically being located because of different reasons. Then what they are doing is also to make sure that these are being properly, sustainably managed, and that efforts are being happen. And I think Suchi was talking about my initial thing on carbon markets. It's something not new. The energy management within the data centers is part of the carbon market conversation for now 10 years, and we do have an approved methodology on how to reduce emissions in those data centers. This was pre-COVID, so obviously they need to have to relook into that, but I think there are foundational things that are available. I'm sure that businesses might also have that. Yeah, I think he wants to intervene.
You're at the top of the value chain, so...
As you also mentioned, the electricity demand will grow tremendously, and you don't need to look at IPCC reports. It already said at least double, and then there are many other studies indicate more than double. And at the same time, 1.5 trajectory somehow indicates that the final demand, energy demand, will stay about this level for the next 3 decades. So those scenarios assume a tremendous increase in efficiencies as well. However, I believe we are really at the farthest end of the most optimistic assumptions about energy efficiency, as well as most conservative estimates for the future growth of electricity. It will grow tremendously. That means to achieve the carbon-free electricity production, we need to consider all kinds of technologies, as long as those technologies produce reductions of the carbon emissions, hopefully a zero carbon outcomes. So we should be technology inclusive and technology neutral to achieve that net zero pathways.
Thank you. So it's a great question to illustrate. The manufacture of semiconductors in Korea and Taiwan requires firm power, huge volume, and decarbonizing that power. How you do that? Can you switch to renewables? Is that not possible? Do you have to use CCS or hydrogen? That work is going on. Manufacturers are increasing the circularity of the machines that we use dramatically. ASUS has doubled the circularity from 35 to 65% just in the last year through existing technologies. Ultimately, this all comes down to decarbonizing power, and I want to, we want to triple renewables, we want to increase energy efficiency, but I also do want to say something about coal. So maybe the answer is transitioning through different technologies, or it's about CCS. But whilst the world is aligned on tripling renewable energy and increasing energy efficiency, if we aren't phasing down coal, phasing out oil and gas, I know that's not popular here at the moment, but emissions aren't going down. So we need to scale up the good stuff, but we need a plan for shutting down the stuff that's hurting our air and raising the temperatures. So I just want to keep that on the table.
I've seen some examples of people using the captive heat for heating in cold countries, and possibly, it can be diverted for beneficial use and not generate, further energy for heating up of the buildings. So I think there are opportunities that people can tap into and see how they can use the amount of heat that is getting generated beneficially. And with that, I think we close the session, because the next session they need to prepare the guys for it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our distinguished speakers for their time and for the depth of understanding they brought to the table. Thank you, Ms. Barwal, for facilitating the session and everyone who has joined us today.